Diary of Dr. X, Episode 31, The Destruction of Farming. So what was farming? I use the past tense for a reason. Anthropology divides human food procurement systems into the following. 1. Hunting and gathering or foraging. 2. Horticulture or gardening. 3. Pastoralism or herding. 4. Intensive agriculture, such as was practiced in the early state-level societies, which allowed for rulers to expropriate surplus production, much like a protection racket, basically. And 5. Industrial agriculture, such as we see in the modern world. I would like to suggest that the latter, industrial agriculture, needs to be subdivided between 1. Farming and 2. Agribusiness. You see, farming was inherently sustainable and viable over the long term, while agribusiness, such as we see today, is inherently destructive, as discussed above in the episodes on products as pollution. So what was farming? Farming was a highly sustainable and decentralized food production system that focused upon local production of food for local distribution and supply. This made it incredibly efficient from an ecological perspective. As a consequence, it has been systematically dismantled by the CCCP agenda, which promotes dependency rather than self-sufficiency. In other words, the CCP agenda wants us all dependent upon the food, energy, and other goods supplied by central planners. Self-sufficiency is the enemy from their perspective. Yes, this is precisely what a farming lifestyle provided. Self-sufficiency. Just like indigenous lifestyles. It has been destroyed in favor of the more economically efficient system of agribusiness. Farming was, by its very nature, mixed farming. This means that each individual farm raised both crops and livestock. The livestock would include a mix of cattle, pigs, and chickens, primarily, with turkeys and sheep being other options. This meant individual farms also raised crops, which were feed for these species, including clover or alfalfa for hay, for cattle, for example, oats for horses, if you had them. Each farm also planted a large garden each summer, thus incorporating horticulture into the system. In this way, each farm was largely self-sufficient in food. Their own meat, their own eggs and milk, their own vegetables and potatoes. And animal wastes provided natural organic fertilizer for the fields. So you didn't need to purchase fertilizers from the big agricultural conglomerates, did you? No. Contrast this with agribusiness. Agribusiness specializes in crop or stock production and on a regional basis. Crops are fed high doses of nutrients to accelerate their growth, and stock is fed growth hormones. It is a system which turns food production itself into a completely anti-ecological system, a system which is designed to primarily produce profit for the big CCCP agricultural conglomerates rather than food or life, as farming most definitely was. You see, feeding the world is not the concern. Power is. And there is no better example of this than the dismantling of the grain distribution system which farmers built and its replacement by a CCCP system. You see, the system farmers built here on the Canadian prairies was based upon a grain elevator in every little town on every rail line. The towns were maybe 15 miles apart here in the Canadian prairies, and the rail lines maybe 20 miles apart. When I was a young man, we could haul our grain directly to the local elevator at harvest time, right from the field. How is it now? The big grain buyers have somehow bought out and destroyed the cooperative companies which the farmers built to distribute their grain. There is a book on that to be written, most definitely. And now we have giant grain terminals roughly every 50 miles from one another. It's like the big grain companies all sat down at a table, which they probably did in fact, and divided the territory between them. So what does this imply? The closing of over 1,000 local elevators to begin with. Also, that farmers are forced to ship their grain further. You see, the farmer design system was based on ecological efficiency. Ship the grain the shortest distance possible by truck so it can be taken to market by rail. A train could take 100 cars full with a single diesel engine. After all, while a truck can haul a fraction of that. But as far as the CCC planners are concerned, it is much more economically efficient to close down all those local elevators and replace them with a handful of terminals. Why? Because it saves on labor, obviously, as well as making the rail pickup much less complicated, all the while offloading the transportation costs onto farmers themselves. It also completely eliminates any competition between the various grain buyers in the previous system. You see, if you didn't like the price, you went to a competitor in the same town or a few miles down the road to sell your grain. Now, the competition is 50 to 100 miles away. And good luck getting a margin on that drive.